Meanwhile, a News Nation Decision Desk HQ poll out yesterday finds 77% of Americans are concerned that the war in the Middle East could lead to a terror attack here in the United States. Joe Pinion, this survey finding that Americans are very nervous, rightly so. 9/11 fresh in our minds, an open U.S. border. Americans are afraid.
Look, it was 19 madmen that committed the atrocities of 9/11 that had this nation etched into eternity, that phrase, never forget. And if you fast forward from there to present, where we understood that our fight was with the terrorists, not with the world of Islam or people who practice of a Muslim faith, now you're sitting here looking at people in Times Square over there chanting from the river to the sea. So we have a real serious problem here in America when you recognize that, to quote Nancy Pelosi, the enemy does appear to be in the House, from the open southern border where we've had over 170 people on the terrorist watch list apprehended, to now people even amongst the civilianry and in Congress who don't seem to take this threat seriously.
Yeah, and look, I mean, certainly time has gone by. Jessica, we are much better prepared, much more aware. Maybe we were not as aware going into 2001, 9/11. But even now, the changes that we're seeing, whether it's on the college campuses, the rhetoric we're seeing on social media, in particular, some of the misinformation on social media, think TikTok, for example, that seems to be stoking this anger towards Jewish Americans, towards the Jewish faith, and they are very afraid, and they have a good reason to be from what we've seen.
Yeah,
in the last
I can't
3
imagine
weeks.
being a Jewish student on these campuses right now, how unsettling that would feel to not feel safe at your own school. And I think generally the American people are fatigued. I mean, we have been through a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. We have dealt with a pandemic, we're dealing with high inflation, the economy's been sputtering for a long time. I mean, we're tired, and these international events, especially one as heartbreaking as what we see in Israel, they're just starting to take a collective toll, I think, on everyone's psyche. It's exhausting.
No, I agree with you completely. And all of this, obviously, as we look to the White House and to Washington for leadership through this crisis, this global crisis. Now, I want to show you this. This is a clip from 2020. This is then presidential candidate Joe Biden. It's resurfaced. He says he fears that then President Donald Trump would cause a war between the U.S. and Iran. Watch this.
As the walls close in on this man, I'm worried he's going to get us to war in Iran. Unfortunately, I may have been right.
Joe, how times have changed. He was right, but he's the president now, and this is now the threat that we face directly from Iran, to be clear.
I thought that when the history books were written, we would figure out that Joe Biden was arguably the most corrupt man to ever occupy the vice president's office. It turns out that Joe Biden is going to be the person that presided over the end of Pax Americana, that period of peacetime that we've seen in the Western world from the end of World War II to present. And when you had President Trump leave office, whatever the Democrats wanted to vilify him as, we certainly were not staring down the barrel of not one, not two, but 3 conflicts, from Gaza to Ukraine to what is brewing over there in the South China Sea as China waits for the next shoe to drop to go in there on Taiwan. And again, remember, the southern border wide open, the doors welded open by this administration. That is the greatest threat that we are not talking about enough while they put their head in the sand and pretend everything is fine.
Well, and Jessica, because they kowtowed to Iran, we went back in and renegotiated with the Iranians and left ourselves open in that door. And now you've got this op-ed from a former CIA officer in the Wall Street Journal. He says, prepare for an Iranian escalation. He says Tehran cannot sit back and watch Israel crush Hamas. Absent serious deterrence, it will open a second front. And this, again, goes into that global conflict.
Yeah, and I think back here at home we have some really tough decisions to make, right? We have rising interest rates, we have swelling debt, we have, we can't. How many places can we be? How much help can we be to our allies? It's so important right now, but we have to make some decisions about what our priorities are here, because we can't spend everything on everyone. We have to decide what's really important to national security.
Well, and that seems to be right now the clear focus of, and there's a piece from the op-ed by Benjamin Netanyahu. We're going to get into that in a moment. This isn't only Israel's war. If Hamas and Iran win, you will be their next target, but we will prevail. Because, again, this is much more now than just Israel and the Gaza Strip. It's much more. All right, we are just getting started this morning. Time for the morning buzz. Think your electric bill is rising fast? Well, Wyoming's largest electricity company, Rocky Mountain Power, is proposing a 29% rate hike on electricity bills to go green. Coal production made up 71% of electricity production in 2022. People in Wyoming have been accustomed to paying some of the lowest electricity prices in the U.S. Joe, your reaction to that? Let's all go green, but it's going to cost you, folks.
Well, look, I think, the Biden administration has been playing that game, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. They've declared war on everything that actually reduces emissions, from nuclear energy to natural gas. They have shut down domestic production of oil, which is actually cleaner than what is produced abroad. We're begging Venezuela to try to figure out how we can actually meet our own domestic energy needs here at home. So any way you want to slice it, if they want to make the world a cleaner place, the policies make no sense. If they want to make sure America is energy independent, the policies are literally the craziest thing you could ever imagine.
And Jessica, this is inflation at its worst and its best, I guess. I mean, you look at the data reports and it's always energy prices that are jumping up, but in the CPI, electricity prices, I see that data continuing to jump month to month, year to year. So Americans aren't getting a break, especially if you live in Wyoming. That's very unfortunate.
Yes, it is. And this is part of the green energy agenda coming home to roost, right? Exactly like Joe was saying. This is a lovely, well-intentioned thought, but it makes no economic sense. It makes no national security sense, and it's ridiculous. We burn clean domestic fuel here in the U.S. Emissions have been coming down for decades. And to act like this is a real solution for people who are not going to be able to pay their bills is completely ridiculous.
And I think the coal production piece of this, Joe, is the most interesting because, there's this big push for electric vehicles, which, by the way, we're seeing consumer demand start to falter in the United States and in China, despite Gavin Newsom going over there to try and tout that. And then you've got the fact that, you can't have electricity without, again, coal. But that's how you power an electric car, and that's how you go green, but you got to bring coal to get there.
Well, none of it makes any sense. I mean, they want to make electric cars, but they've actually prevented us from doing the mining that gets us the rare earth minerals that are required to make the chips. So they announced the openings of new chip manufacturing plants with none of the minerals to make the actual product. They say that they're going to make sure everyone goes green. It's that most people can't afford the cars. We've got 500,000 Americans ready to default on the cars they already have. So the Bidenomics is not working. The energy policies are not working, and you've got bankrupt Americans looking at a 29% hike in Wyoming, but even here in New York, they just raised rates 2 months ago, 10%, and we're looking at another rate hike here in New York as well. So any way you want to slice it, they've shut down Indian Point in New York, the last downstate nuclear plant that we had here, providing the bulk of that energy to the tri-state area. So the policies are not working, the American people are suffering, and more important, national security is impacted when you realize we don't have the power to power ourselves, and Joe Biden there emptying the Strategic Petroleum Reserve when we're on the brink of not one, not two, but 3 potential foreign wars and whatever has already
when
crossed
you're going to see oil prices. Go ahead. Final word here.
Yeah, not to be outdone, California is leading the chaos in all of this, right? You have a grid that's already has rolling brownouts, and they're the ones pushing hardest for everyone to plug their car into the grid. And I think politicians have to remember that something has to be on the other side of that grid. You have to let power go onto the grid if you want to draw from it.
It's not magic.
Little known fact.
Yeah. But apparently they think it is. It's California. What can you say? All right, coming up, just 11 weeks out from the Iowa caucuses, we are talking how the 2024 field is taking shape. That's coming up. The hot topic of the hour is next. Good morning. I'm Cheryl Casoni. I'm in for Maria Bartiromo. It is Tuesday, October 31st. It's Halloween, by the way. It's 7 a.m. on the East Coast. It is time for the hot topic of the hour. The Iowa caucuses are just 11 weeks away, and former President Donald Trump is maintaining his strong lead over his Republican competitors in the 2024 race for the White House. A new NBC News Des Moines Register Mediacom survey shows Trump at 43% among likely Republican caucus goers in Iowa, followed by Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. They're both tied at 16%. So compared to the same poll in August, Haley is up 10 percentage points. DeSantis is down by 3. What do you make of all of this, Joe? I mean, obviously, the former president is strongly in the lead, but Nikki Haley seems to be really gaining some ground here.
Well, look, 11 weeks is an eternity in politics, so it appears that there could be a pathway there for somebody like Nikki Haley to emerge here. I think the problem is that every historical indicator that we have indicates that this primary is likely over, statistically speaking. Even if you look at what President Obama was able to do going all the way back to 2008, running against what was then the unshakable brand in American politics, the Clintons, he was already down by no less than 3 points, according to that same polling service in Iowa, against Hillary Clinton. So I just think that there is the runway is getting very short here if anyone is going to try to close a 20, 30-point gap by some estimations.
Interesting, Jessica. What do you make of that?
I agree, but I think that runway, as it gets shorter, it's also getting a little more interesting because people are starting to drop out, right? And we're hearing rumors of more and more of those are on the way. So I think that does increase the chances that someone will be able to give President Trump a run for his money. And I don't think we really know. You know, the only poll that works is on Election Day, right?
Correct.
That's the real number.
Polls,
So,
yeah, polls can be sometimes not right. We've learned that. We learned
And
that.
also, you know, particularly in Iowa, it's a caucus, right? And so people forget, people have to show up, you have to be organized, people have to stand there.
Stand in the corners.
Stand in those corners, figure out if their person is going to actually make the threshold. Then if they don't make the threshold, move over. So do we see some of that consolidation there? How strong is President Trump on the ground? Are they doing more tweeting than they are actual organizing? Who is to say? But ultimately, at the end of the day, like I said, if someone's going to make a move, now would be the time, because otherwise, again, it looks like if President Trump does what he is projected to do in Iowa and New Hampshire, we are going to have spent over $1 billion as a Republican Party on a primary, while Joe Biden does basically nothing.
They've also got the 4 different indictments against the former president. So with his legal troubles, you know, kind of taking center stage, I'm sure that some of these candidates are waiting to see what's going to happen with that may occupy his time. To say the least. So let's get back to Nikki Haley. So she could pose a threat to President Biden if former President Trump were to pick her as the VP. So CNN commentator Errol Lewis pointed to her poll with suburban voters. Joe, I want to get your reaction on this one.
She may end up on the ticket with Donald Trump. The reality is he has the biggest amount of trouble. And frankly, a lot of Biden's margin of victory in 2020 was due to college-educated suburban women. And that's what Nikki Haley is.
And then you've got this op-ed from the Wall Street Journal's Andrew Stein. And here's the title, Joe. I backed Trump, but now I'm for Haley. Basically saying that she's got strong foreign policy experience, can appeal to both independent and suburban voters.
Well, look, if you're looking at just where the Republicans struggle in 2020 during the period where President Trump was in office, it was with suburban female voters. Even here in New York, Hakeem Jeffries has targeted seats here in those suburbs of New York City with the tune of $40 million because they believe they can claw back those seats with Trump on the ballot. So, yes, I think somebody like Nikki Haley with the foreign policy experience, with the ability to articulate a message that I think resonates with women, I think there is a certain level of trust built in with a female voting population in the same way that President or Vice President Pence was able to provide a certain level of trust with that evangelical base back in 2016 when President Trump needed it.
Mike Pence, who's no longer in the race. But Stein also writes, and I want to get your take on this, especially on the female demographics here, Jessica, but he says about her, as a former ambassador to the UN, she's one of the few candidates with real foreign policy experience at a time when that experience is going to be very, very important for the next president, which is a very good point to make as we're dealing with China, Taiwan, you know, the war in Israel, Ukraine, Russia.
Yeah, I agree. She can walk the walk. And, you know, foreign affairs usually aren't that important to American voters, but we're in a very different time now where I think that might be something that's really shifted for people. And her experience, yeah, I mean, that recommends her. She has great momentum coming out of that debate. She really kind of surprised everyone, I think. So Trump has a lead, but she seems to be moving up. You know, she's got the momentum going. We'll just see. Yeah. I don't know about about on the same ballot. I can see why it makes political sense, but I'm not sure if them having worked together before makes it easier or
Well, I don't
harder
know that
to put
she
that
would.
together. Yeah,
I'm not sure she would say yes, but that's really. I mean, after she's been very critical of the former president.
Look,
So.
I mean, politics makes strange bedfellows. Ambassador Haley has excelled at every level of government, from the governor's mansion to the state house to now as a presidential candidate. So I do think there is a pathway there for her, and I think that she gets to go on the debate stage on the next debate and go to Vivek and say, look, you were the one who said you were going to be able to clear up all the issues in Gaza and the Middle East in just 2 short years. Look at what a mess we've had in just 3 short weeks.
So we've had 2 debates, both here on Fox, where the former president didn't show up. Joe, does he show up for the next one, do you think?
No. I think that democracy demands debate. I also understand politically that if you look at those numbers, there is more to lose for President Trump than to gain.
Okay, interesting. All right, well, we've got a lot more coming up this morning. We're getting back to our markets. We've got a little bit of a retrenchment as far as the futures go. We actually pulled back a little bit from those triple-digit gains we had earlier, as you can see here. A big week of earnings, econ data. The Fed meeting kicks off today. Word on Wall Street, our panel is here with all their expectations. It's coming up. Don't miss a moment of it. You're watching Mornings with Maria live on Fox Business.